Without trying to recap what occurred with the Katrina and Rita disasters, we'd like to present ideas, recommendations, and observations about emergency preparedness as lessons learned from first responders, corporations, the government, and volunteer organizations. You've all seen emergencies on television and have a good understanding of how disastrous emergencies can be to everyone. Keep in mind, emergency preparedness is a personal responsibility, regardless of the type of emergency. Local, state, and federal governments have responsibilities, but it's up to each individual to provide proper personal planning and preparation. It's a team effort. Planning for terrorism, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, and other emergencies is just good business. This program relates to almost any type of emergency, including terrorism, although we will discuss predominantly hurricane and flooding disasters. While most workers can stay inside during an emergency, some workers may be required to conduct their business during the emergency. This may include utility workers, law enforcement personnel, firefighters, emergency medical personnel, federal, state, and local government sanitation and highway transportation, and military personnel. Many of the hazards occur to workers immediately after the emergency is passed, during cleanup and utility restoration work. These activities are even more hazardous in areas of flooding. According to the National Weather Service, about 70% of injuries during hurricanes and tornadoes result from vehicle accidents, and about 25% of injuries result from being caught out in the storm. Some of the specific hazards associated with working in hurricanes or tornadoes include hazardous driving conditions due to slippery roadways, slips and falls due to slippery walkways, falling and flying objects, such as tree limbs and utility poles, electrical hazards from downed power lines or downed objects in contact with power lines, falls from heights, burns or fires caused by energized line contact or equipment failure, exhaustion from working extended shifts, dehydration, illness, and psychological trauma. Common sense tells us to stay well clear of any downed or damaged power lines. Establish a safe distance from the lines and report the incident to the responsible authority. Only properly trained electrical utility workers should handle damaged power lines. When emergencies occur, downed trees can block public roads and damage power lines. Emergency crews are often sent out to clear downed trees during these storms. Only appropriate power equipment that is built to be used outdoors and in wet conditions should be used. All saws, chippers, and other tools should be used properly and according to their intended application. It is important that all equipment is well maintained and functioning correctly for proper use. In addition, all equipment should have proper guarding, working controls, and other safety features as installed by the manufacturer. Drivers in a hurricane's path who are not going to be driving their car should park it on high ground, as close as possible to a sturdy building, and seek shelter as quickly as possible. Avoid driving through standing water. If you come upon a flooded street, take an alternate route. When evacuating an area, be prepared for long lines on the road because the roads will be very congested. Planning for major congestion helps reduce road rage. Don't forget the gas for your vehicles. In case of tornadoes, if you are in your car, you should stop and get out of your vehicle. Do not get under an overpass or bridge. You are safer in a low, flat location. If there is no shelter immediately available, you should avoid trees and vehicles. Lie down flat in a gully, ditch, or low spot on the ground and protect your head with an object or your arms. If shelter is available, move to the basement or a safe room. Stay away from the windows and glass doorways. Go to the center of the room, staying away from the corners, and make yourself the smallest target possible. If an underground shelter is not available, move to a small interior room or hallway, or the lowest floor, and get under a sturdy piece of furniture. Put as many walls as possible between you and the outside. Cleanup work of any kind is hazardous. but flood conditions make it even more so. Following the procedures listed below will help you keep safe and healthy while cleaning up after natural disasters that involve flooding. Take frequent rest breaks when lifting heavy, water-laden objects. Avoid overexertion and practice good lifting techniques. To help prevent injury, use teams of 2 or more to move bulky objects. Avoid lifting any materials that weigh more than 50 pounds per person, and use proper automated lifting assistance devices if practical. When working in hot environments, have plenty of drinking water available. Use sunscreen and take frequent rest breaks. Wear light-colored, loose-fitting clothing. Keep in mind that sports drinks may be available, but too much of this type of liquid can be hazardous. Drink plenty of water and don't rely on sports drinks for your liquid intake.
One of the problems we have found with the basis of this is that we actually have had cases in the United States, and there was an issue of a company here in Texas that we utilize materials such as Gatorade and Quench, and it is manufactured, or the manufacturer of this product specifically says, here's how you have to dilute this material. We have had individuals who obviously we don't like the taste of the material or the liquid, because it has no flavor to it when we mix it as we're supposed to, so we mix it stronger. In mixing it stronger, what ends up happening is your body uses all the minerals that's in this particular material, and where does the rest of it go? It's flushed to the sewer system of your body, which happens to be your kidneys. And what has happened is that we have had people actually have to go on dialysis to balance their kidneys, or to get their kidneys balanced again, because there is no water and not drinking water and not allowing you to flush this extra minerals out of your body, which your body did need. And again, it is important to remember that if you are drinking this material, that you drink water along with it to help flush the excess of these minerals out of your body.
Be sure a first aid kit is available to disinfect any cuts or abrasions. Protect open cuts and abrasions with waterproof gloves or dressings. Wash your hands often during the day, especially before eating, drinking, or applying cosmetics. Use a wooden stick or pole to check flooded areas for pits, holes, and protruding objects before entering. Ensure that all ladders and scaffolds are properly secured prior to use. Conduct a preliminary worksite inspection to verify stability before entering a flooded or formerly flooded building, or before operating vehicles over roadways or surfaces. Don't work in or around any flood-damaged building until it has been examined and certified as safe for work by a registered professional engineer or architect. Washouts, trenches, excavations, and gullies must be supported or their stability verified prior to worker entry. All trenches should be supported as in any normal trenching operations. An emergency doesn't lessen the hazard of a cave-in. Establish a plan for contacting medical personnel in the event of an emergency. Report any obvious hazards, such as downed power lines, frayed electrical wires, gas leaks, or snakes, to appropriate authorities. Use fuel-powered generators outdoors. Do not bring them indoors. Never use fuels, including charcoal, indoors. Use life vests when engaged in activities that could result in deep water exposure. Use extreme caution when handling containers holding unknown substances or known toxic substances. Do not use improvised surfaces such as refrigerator racks for cooking food or for boiling water to avoid exposure to heavy metals. Always wear watertight boots with steel toe and insole, gloves, long pants, and safety glasses during cleanup operations. Sneakers should not be worn because they will not prevent punctures, bites, or crush injuries. Wear a hard hat if there is any danger of falling debris. Wear a NIOSH-approved dust respirator if working with moldy building materials or vegetable matter such as hay, stored grain, or compost. When handling chemicals, follow the directions on the package. Wear eye, hand, and face protection as appropriate, and have plenty of clean water available for eye wash and other first aid treatments. Immediately evacuate any building that has a gas leak until the leak is controlled and the area ventilated. Be sure an adequate number of fire extinguishers are available and reevaluate the fire evacuation plan. Be sure all fire exits are clear of debris and sandbags. Flood conditions contribute to the growth and transmission of many kinds of fungi, some of which can cause sickness. Cleanup workers are at increased risk of exposure to airborne fungi and their spores because they often handle moldy building materials, decaying vegetable matter, rotting waste material, and other fungus-contaminated debris. The fungi material is carried into the respiratory tract when airborne dust particles are inhaled. There are many different kinds of fungi, including mildew, molds, rusts, and yeasts. Many of these are harmless, but some can cause respiratory and other disorders when workers inhale or come into contact with fungi. Inhalation is the route of exposure of most concern to flood cleanup workers. For workers cleaning up flooded buildings, homes, and other structures, excessive moisture or water accumulation indoors will encourage the growth of the fungi that are already present. Some fungi have the potential to cause adverse health effects such as allergic responses and asthma attacks. Individuals who are sensitive to molds may have signs and symptoms of allergic reactions such as nasal stuffiness, eye irritation, and wheezing. These individuals should minimize fungal exposure by wearing respirators, gloves, and eye protection. In addition, repeated or prolonged contact of the skin with floodwater and continuous sweating can lead to fungal skin infections. These can be minimized or avoided by washing the skin with warm, soapy water and keeping it as dry as possible. If a cleanup worker experiences severe allergic or skin symptoms or severe flu-like symptoms, he or she should seek medical advice. A healthcare provider can determine whether medication or any other precautions are necessary. For all workers that may be exposed to mold or fungi, avoid breathing dust or fungal spores generated by wet building materials, crops, and other materials. Consider using an N95 NIOSH-approved disposable respirator as a minimum when working with moldy or damp hay, grain, compost, or building materials. Consider discarding all water-damaged materials. Articles that are visibly contaminated with mold should be discarded. When in doubt, throw it out. Surfaces that have a light covering of mold should be scrubbed with warm soapy water and rinsed with a disinfectant made of 1/2 cup liquid household bleach mixed in 1 gallon of water. Caution: do not mix bleach with other cleaning products that contain ammonia. After working with mold-contaminated materials, wash thoroughly, including the hair, scalp, and nails. If the safety of food or beverage is questionable, throw it out. Only drink safe drinking water that has been bottled, boiled, or treated until there is a confirmation that the community water supply is safe for consumption. For workers that are cleaning up or renovating buildings and homes that have been flooded, consider the following recommendations. If flooding has caused severe damage to a building or home and there is the chance of extensive mold growth, consult with the local health department to identify a professional with expertise in mold remediation. If you suspect that flooding has damaged building integrity, consult a structural engineer or other professional with appropriate expertise. NIOSH-approved respirators are strongly recommended. Respiratory protection, such as the N95, must be used in accordance with OSHA's Respiratory Protection standard. Also, wear gloves and eye protection. Remove building materials and furnishings that are wet and may become contaminated with mold growth, and place them in sealed, impermeable bags or closed containers. Large items with heavy mold growth should be covered with polyethylene sheeting and sealed with duct tape before being removed from the area. These materials can usually be discarded as ordinary construction waste. Remove and discard porous organic materials that have become wet or are visibly contaminated, such as damp insulation in the ventilation system, moldy ceiling tiles, and mildewed carpets. Again, these materials can usually be discarded as ordinary construction waste. Clean and disinfect non-porous surfaces where microbial growth has occurred with detergents, chlorine-generating slimicides, or other biocides, and ensure that these cleaners have been removed before air handling units are turned on. When you use a biocide or disinfectant, use appropriate personal protective equipment. NIOSH-approved respirators with the appropriate chemical cartridges are recommended. Wear gloves and eye protection. It may appear that emergencies take priority over safety, but it does no good to harm yourselves by not following proper precautions and procedures. Safety is still a priority. Although infectious diseases are a frightening prospect, widespread outbreaks of infectious disease after hurricanes or other emergencies are not common in the United States. Rare and deadly exotic diseases such as cholera or typhoid do not suddenly break out after hurricanes and floods in areas where such diseases do not naturally occur. Communicable disease outbreaks of diarrhea and respiratory illness can occur when water and sewage systems are not working and personal hygiene is hard to maintain as a result of a disaster. Decaying bodies create very little risk for major disease outbreaks. Outbreaks of infectious diseases following emergencies are rare in developed countries, such as the United States, and only slightly more common in the developing world. Numbers of short-term, self-limiting gastrointestinal illnesses and respiratory infections sometimes increase. However, numbers of communicable diseases more typically do not increase in either developed or developing countries. Unless a disease is brought into a disaster area from elsewhere, any outbreaks that occur are almost always from diseases that were already in the disaster-affected area before the disaster struck. Communicable disease outbreaks can occur when sanitation and hygiene are compromised as a result of a disaster. There is no direct risk of contagious or infectious disease from being near human remains for people who are not directly involved in recovery or other efforts that require handling dead bodies. Individuals in affected areas should instead exercise caution to avoid well-documented threats to health and safety, such as injury hazards from sharp debris and from unidentified structural damage to buildings, power lines, roads, and industrial facilities. Loss of sanitary infrastructure may result in exposure to raw sewage, loss of local drinking water treatment capacity, and inability to maintain refrigeration for food and medical supplies. Precautions for individuals who must have direct contact with human remains are important. Human remains may contain blood-borne viruses such as hepatitis, viruses and HIV, and bacteria that cause diarrheal disease such as Shigella and Salmonella. These viruses and bacteria do not pose a risk to someone walking nearby, nor do they cause significant environmental contamination. Bacteria and viruses from human remains in floodwater are a minor part of the overall contamination that can include uncontrolled sewage, a variety of soil and water organisms, and household and industrial chemicals. There are no additional practices or precautions for floodwater related to human remains, beyond what is normally required for safe food and drinking water, standard hygiene, and first aid. However, for people who must directly handle remains, such as recovery personnel or persons identifying remains or preparing the remains for burial or cremation, there can be a risk of exposure to such viruses or bacteria. Protect your face from splashes of body fluids and fecal material. You can use a plastic face shield or a combination of eye protection, such as indirectly vented safety goggles, are a good choice if available. Also, a surgical mask. Remember, safety glasses will only provide limited protection. In extreme situations, a cloth tied over the nose and mouth can be used to block splashes. Protect your hands from direct contact with body fluids and also from cuts, puncture wounds, or other injuries that break the skin that might be caused by sharp environmental debris or bone fragments. A combination of a cut-proof inner layer glove and a latex or similar outer layer is preferable. Footwear should similarly protect against sharp debris. Maintain hand hygiene to prevent transmission of diarrheal and other diseases from fecal materials on your hands. Wash your hands with soap and water or with an alcohol-based hand cleaner immediately after you remove your gloves. Give prompt care, including immediate cleansing with soap and clean water, and a tetanus booster if indicated, to any wounds sustained during work with human remains. In addition to guarding physical safety, participate in available programs to provide psychological and emotional support for workers handling human remains. Agencies coordinating the management of human remains are encouraged to develop programs providing psychological and emotional support and care for workers during and after recovery activities. Other considerations from the public health perspective of lowering the risk of possible infectious disease transmission. There is no requirement for mass burials or cremation. Response workers should assist local communities to identify a safe location for holding remains awaiting identification. This location should be shielded from public view if possible, and remains should be protected from scavenging animals. If available, use body bags to contain remains. If available, refrigeration can reduce the rate of decay and facilitate identification. The sight and smell of decay are unpleasant, but they do not create a public health hazard. Some immunizations for first responders may be required, such as tetanus and diphtheria toxoid, with receipt of primary series, and TD booster within 10 years. Hepatitis B vaccine series for persons who will be performing direct patient care or otherwise expected to have contact with bodily fluids. Your physician will make recommendations based upon the potential threat. Homeowners and responders should not attempt to install any generator that requires hard wiring into an existing electrical circuit. Have a trained, qualified electrician hardwire any generator into a household circuit. When power lines are down, residents can restore energy to their homes by using another power source such as a portable generator. If the generator is plugged into a household circuit, or if it is improperly sized, installed, or operated, the electrical current could reverse, go back through the circuit to the power grid, and then increase in voltage. If a worker attempts to repair power lines when this happens, the worker could be electrocuted. This problem is called backfeed or feedback in the electrical energy in power lines. Backfeed can seriously injure or kill repair workers or people in neighboring buildings. Once the generator has been installed by a qualified electrician, be sure that the main circuit breaker is off and locked out prior to starting the generator. This will help protect utility workers from possible electrocution. The problem of backfeed in electrical energy is a constant risk for electrical energy workers. Electrocutions are the 5th leading cause of all reported occupational deaths. Treat all power lines as hot unless the lines have been de-energized and grounded. Because of the possibility of a feedback circuit, the worker should ground all lines on both sides of the work area unless he or she is wearing the proper personal protective equipment, including eye face protection and National Electric Code NEC-rated and approved gloves and sleeves. Prevent electrocutions by conducting standard tests to decide if there is high voltage in the power lines. Low voltage includes voltages from 50 to 600 volts. High voltage includes voltages of 601 volts to 230,000. Extra high voltage is any voltage over 230,000 volts. Use low-voltage testing equipment, such as a glowing neon light or light-emitting diode-type equipment, to determine whether there is low voltage present. High-voltage tests may not identify lower voltage levels. Lower voltages are also deadly. Power lines should not be repaired or otherwise accessed without adequate personal protective equipment, including eye face protection and NEC-rated and approved gloves and sleeves. Generator use is also a major cause of carbon monoxide, CO poisoning. Generators should only be used in well-ventilated areas and never indoors. Carbon monoxide, CO, is an odorless, colorless gas that can cause sudden illness and death if you breathe it. Never use generators, pressure washers, grills, camp stoves, or other gasoline, propane, natural gas, or charcoal burning devices inside your home, basement, garage, or camper, or even outside near an open window, door, or vent. Don't heat your house with a gas oven. If you are too hot or too cold, or you need to prepare food, don't put yourself and your family at risk of CO poisoning. Look to friends, family, or a community shelter for help. During the Rita hurricane, 5 members of one family died because they used a generator inside their apartment. Seek prompt medical attention if you suspect carbon monoxide poisoning and are feeling dizzy, lightheaded, or nauseated. Protect yourself from animal and insect-related hazards by avoiding wild or stray animals and biting or stinging insects. Use insect repellent that is normally supplied by your employer. Mosquitoes can be deadly, particularly after an emergency. Mosquitoes can carry a variety of diseases such as malaria, West Nile virus, and equine encephalitis, among others. Besides the nuisance of mosquitoes, female mosquitoes insert their proboscis into the skin to extract blood from your body. As they extract the blood, they leave their saliva in your skin, which means if they have any diseases, they are leaving part of that disease in your skin and body. Mosquito and insect control after a hurricane is extremely important, and until the situation is in hand, insect repellent can help prevent these potential hazards. Blowflies flow to dead animals and dead human remains. Not only are they a nuisance, they can spread gastrointestinal and other illnesses. Eradication efforts of these insects will help control blowflies. However, pesticides should be used by a certified applicator who has proper training and knowledge of pesticides. In most cases, the mosquitoes will be pests but will not carry communicable diseases. To protect yourself from mosquitoes, use screens on dwellings and wear long pants, socks, and long-sleeved shirts, and using insect repellents that contain DEET or picaridin. Care must be taken when using DEET on small children. To control mosquito populations, drain all standing water left in open containers, such as flower pots, tires, pet dishes, or buckets outside your home. Another insect that can be hazardous, especially in the south, is fire ants. Fire ants can survive quite easily in hurricanes and floods and be very dangerous when disturbed, so be careful with these pesky insects. Call local authorities to handle animals. Get rid of dead animals according to local guidelines as soon as you can. Rescuing pets can be hazardous as they may be scared or consider you invading their territory and respond accordingly. If you're bitten by an animal, seek immediate medical attention. If you're bitten by a snake, try to identify it so that if it is poisonous, you can be given the correct antivenom. Do not cut the wound or attempt to suck the venom out. Food may not be safe to eat during and after an emergency. Water may not be safe for cooking. Local authorities will tell you if water is safe to drink or to use for cooking. Follow local instructions to use bottled water or to boil or disinfect water for cooking. Water may not be safe to drink, clean with, or bathe in after an emergency, such as a hurricane or flood. During and after a disaster, water can be contaminated with microorganisms such as bacteria, sewage, agricultural or industrial wastes, chemicals, and other substances that can cause illness or death. Listen to and follow public announcements. Local authorities will tell you if water is safe to drink or to use for cooking or bathing. Follow local instructions to use bottled water or to boil or disinfect water for cooking, cleaning, or bathing. Always wash your hands with soap and boiled or disinfected water before preparing or eating food, after toilet use, after participating in cleanup activities, and after handling articles contaminated with floodwater or sewage. Wash children's hands frequently and always before meals. Disinfect water for washing by mixing 1/8 teaspoon of household bleach per 1 gallon of water. Let it stand for 30 minutes. If the water is cloudy, use a solution of 1/4 tablespoon of household bleach per 1 gallon of water. If water isn't available, use alcohol-based products made for washing hands. If there is flooding along with a hurricane, the waters may contain fecal material from overflowing sewage systems and agricultural and industrial waste. Although skin contact with floodwater does not, by itself, pose a serious health risk, there is a risk of disease from eating or drinking anything contaminated with floodwater. If there's been a backflow of sewage into your house, wear rubber boots and waterproof gloves during cleanup. Remove and discard contaminated household materials that cannot be disinfected, such as wall coverings, cloth, rugs, and drywall. If you have any open cuts or sores that will be exposed to floodwater, keep them as clean as possible by washing them with soap and applying an antibiotic ointment to discourage infection. Wash clothes contaminated with flood or sewage water in hot water and detergent and separately from uncontaminated clothes and linens. Do not allow children to play in floodwater areas, and do not allow children to play with floodwater-contaminated toys that have not been disinfected. Disinfect toys using a solution of 1 cup of bleach in 5 gallons of water. Immediately clean out all open wounds and cuts with soap and clean water. Apply an antibiotic ointment to discourage infection. Contact a doctor to find out whether more treatment is needed, such as a tetanus shot. If a wound gets red, swells, or drains, seek immediate medical attention. The days and weeks after an emergency are going to be rough. Some sleeplessness, anxiety, anger, hyperactivity, mild depression, or lethargy are normal and may go away with time. If you feel any of these symptoms acutely, seek counseling. Your state and local health departments will help you find local resources, including hospitals or healthcare providers that you may need. Seek medical care if you're injured, feel sick, or have acute stress and anxiety. Keep as many elements of your normal routine incorporated into the disaster plans as possible, including activities to allay children's fears. Be aware that you may have fewer resources to attend to your day-to-day conflicts, so it's best to resolve what you can ahead of time. Turn to family, friends, and important social or religious contacts to set up networks to help deal with the potential stressors. Let your children know that it's okay to feel upset when something bad or scary happens. Encourage your child to express feelings and thoughts without making judgments. Caring for the elderly and sick are major problems. Proper evacuation and transportation are critical issues. Medical care facilities may be overwhelmed. Patients may not have adequate care or prescription medicines. Medical care is an important part of planning.
There will come a day in Texas when the people of Texas are going to need volunteers to help out their community, just for a few days, maybe for a few weeks. And they're going to be looking for the people all across Texas to help out. And so if you have a heart for helping the people of Texas in disasters, emergency relief, we, the Texas Medical Rangers, can provide that forum, that opportunity for you to volunteer as part of a very professional organization to be ready at the call of the governor to help communities all across Texas.
We've just touched the surface because emergency response is a long-term effort. It begins in the planning stage, and that plan is always continually updated. Practice the plan. Find out the bugs and determine how to best plan for different types of emergencies. Terrorist attacks, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and similar emergencies are unique, as one plan does not fit all. However, the basic concepts are stepping stones to prepare for almost any emergency. We've seen the mistakes made in previous disasters and emergencies. We found out that you can't rely on cell phones during an emergency, And communications blackout can be horrendous when trying to coordinate different responders and support personnel. Not enough preparation when considering the large influx of people who must be evacuated. What happens if a dirty bomb explodes in a large metropolitan area? People will panic and have no idea what to do. Katrina and Rita evacuations showed lines of cars 100 miles long, 24 hours on the road to travel 250 miles. It was a nightmare. People ran out of gas because the planners forgot that gasoline would be needed in a major evacuation. And these were planned evacuations. What happens if a terrorist strikes a large city? How will you get out and where will you go? How many people will be displaced? What will they eat, drink, and will there be enough sanitary facilities? What happens after several days in emergency shelters? There are hundreds of unanswered questions that can be addressed, but training and preparation remain high on the priority list. When you're allowed to return to the evacuated area, there may be no electricity or running water or garbage pickup. Personal responsibility and planning for emergencies are the best steps in preventing poor performance. Over the many years, we've learned much about disasters, but we know there's much more to do. Another important consideration is the tremendous work that first responders provide in time of need. Think of the many thousands of men and women who volunteer their services, time, money, and attention to the people who need it most. They have performed miracles in the past and will continue to do so in time of need, but each individual must take the responsibility for his or her safety and plan accordingly. Let's help prepare and train for the next big one, whether it's a terrorist attack, flood, earthquake, tornado, or other emergency.